It's chapter 6, verses 6 to 8. Starting at verse 6. You might even say in your Bible, what does the Lord require as a heading? Some of the Bibles say that. Okay, so what does the Lord require? Verse 6. With what shall I come to the Lord and bow myself before the God on high? Shall I come to him with burnt offerings, with yearling calves? Does the Lord take delight in thousands of rams, in 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I present my firstborn for my rebellious acts, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. So how do you get to be in the flock? Oh, you bring the ruler gifts and burn sacrifices and not... No. Exactly. In verse 8, the original listeners would have been actually clicking in because they would have known a little bit from their documents, the Torah, the original 5 books of the Bible. The Israelites would have known a little phrase here. What does the Lord require of you? I'll read it for you. You don't need to flick to Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 to 13. Now, Israel, what does the Lord require from you? That's what, when they heard the phrase, they would have been thinking of this passage. What does the Lord require from you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways and love him, and serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And to keep the Lord's commandments and his statutes, which I am commanding you today for your good. That's about the time where he gives the 10 Commandments. So it is following the law, being obedient to the law of God. So it isn't about the sacrifices or special religious ceremony. It was about, as we just saw, to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God. And there's this element of obedience too. We're going to see more in a moment. So now that we're more recent than Micah, and we've even know about what happened with Jesus, some of the apostles wrote about this. We're going to look at just a couple of verses in 1 Peter. You don't need to turn there, just stay in Micah. I'll come back to it there. But 1 Peter 2, verses 9 to 12. Just picking up at verse 11, Peter says, Beloved as in those people who are, I would say, Christian brothers and sisters, beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers from this world to abstain from fleshly lusts which wage war against the soul. Keep your behaviour excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, observe them and glorify God in the day of visitation. So, because of your excellent behaviour and your good deeds, people will notice you and glorify God. So we have New Testament people picking up on this as well. Okay, the Great Shepherd King. A little bit more on the Great Shepherd King. Micah goes on in chapter 7, the last chapter of Micah. This is the final chapter. Chapter 7, from verse 14 to 20. I'm going to skip a few verses, but just pick up on about half of them as we go through. So feel free to skim along as I go, or just listen. Verse 14. So listen to what it says about the Shepherd King. Verse 14. Shepherd your people with your scepter, the flock of your possession, which dwells by itself in the woodland, in the midst of a fruitful field. Verse 16. Nations will see and be ashamed of all their might. They will put their hand on their mouth. Their ears will be deaf. Verse 17. They will lick the dust like a serpent, like reptiles of the earth. They will come trembling out of their fortresses. To the Lord our God, they will come in dread, and they will be afraid before you. Wow. This is a pretty cool Shepherd King, isn't it? Verse 18. Who is a God like you, who pardons iniquity and passes over the rebellious acts of the remnant of his possession? He does not retain his anger forever, because he delights in unchanging love. He will again have compassion on us. Verse 19. He will again have compassion on us. He will tread our iniquities underfoot. Yes, you will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. Wow. All the enemies are dreading God. And what's he do for those who are his flock? His sheepies? Pardons iniquities. Doesn't retain his anger. Delights in unchanging love. Having compassion, casting all their sins in the sea. I wonder, maybe even in the Sunday school right now, if you ask the children, can you draw us a picture of what God is like? Like, not so much what his face looks like or anything, but what is his character like? What do you think our children, or even we, if we were drawing our children as an example, what do you think we would draw in a picture of what God is like? What are the key things that jump into your mind? Loving, kind, forgiving, merciful, all those things. There's just as much in the Bible, in fact, probably even a little bit more, about how fearful and judging God is. Yeah. So would you put flame coming out of the God and burning people up? There's this element of God that I think we often, especially in our culture of wanting to have lots of love and lots of being kind to everyone and, oh, it's okay, don't worry too much. I think we sometimes miss out on this aspect of this dread of God's enemies, those who aren't in his flock. But there's also, definitely we saw, those ideas of mercy and love and the way that he forgives what deserves to be punished. There is a mighty shepherd king who will rule. People will dread him, but he will have compassion. He will pardon iniquity, casting all the sins of his flock into the depths of the sea. This is an incredible picture for us who are helpless sheep. We have seen that the actions of God's people will deserve judgment. That's what Micah's in Jerusalem about. He's telling God's people, you deserve judgment. However, there is hope. There is these glimpses of hope that Micah puts in there. And it's all captured under this shepherd king. The shepherd king who will save the remnant, the remaining few. We have seen that the shepherd king is Jesus. Through Jesus, we will be saved from our sin if we are sheep in his flock.